"What on earth are you doing here?" Fred Smith asked. Standing across the hall from him was the last woman Fred Smith ever wanted to see again, especially at the Fairy Forest Resort Hotel, where Fred had specifically gone with his son to take him to the theme park Dragon World. Dr. Quinn Murphy looked up into the eyes of a fuming Fred Smith. She clutched the hotel paperwork, medical bag, and suitcases to her chest. Her two children stood around and giggled. What they didn't know was that the two boys, Jake Smith and Denny Murphy, had switched places, and that this was their plan to finally switch back now that Fred had finally banished Jake's evil mom Beatrice from their home for good. All three of Quinn's children had plotted a master plan to bring their families back together by forcing Fred and Quinn to the same theme park getaway. They were convinced that their parents were perfect for each other and should get married. Unfortunately, Quinn and Fred could not stand each other. "I'm on vacation with my kids. What are you doing here?" Quinn asked. "The same thing." "Mom, can we go now? I want to ride the roller coaster." Jake Smith, pretending to be Denny Murphy, tugged on her shirt. "Okay, sweetie, one moment." Quinn pushed the door open to let Jake and Sammy inside. "I want to ride the roller coaster too," Denny Murphy, pretending to be Jake Smith, whispered to Fred. "We will, kiddo. We will ride as many times as you want." Fred and Quinn glared at each other. "Let's just agree to stay out of one another's way," Quinn yelled to him across the hall. "Fine, as long as you stay away from my son," Fred agreed. He pushed Denny inside the room and slammed the door shut behind him. Later that day, Quinn stood with Sammy and Jake in the line for the biggest roller coaster in the park, Dragon's Breath, a giant looping coaster that spewed fake fire when it accelerated. Sammy leaned against Quinn. They were both exhausted from walking around the park all day. They'd run across goblins, warlocks, and damsels in distress in the park already. Sammy was now dressed as a knight, and Jake was in a wizard cape. They'd had enough witch's stew at lunch that Sammy was about to fall asleep standing up. "Do we have to ride the coaster again, Denny?" Sammy asked. Jake crossed his arms and looked over at her. "Duh, we have to ride it. It's the main attraction at Dragon World." Sammy huddled close to Quinn when the coaster made another giant loop above their heads, full of screams. "I don't know. It looks really scary," Sammy whispered. "That's the whole point." Jake jumped up and down so that his cape flew behind him like he was flying. Quinn squeezed Sammy's hand. "You don't have to go on if you don't want to, sweetie." But just then, the family was interrupted. "Oh, look who we have here," Fred hissed from behind Quinn. Quinn squeezed her eyes shut and took a deep breath. "Hello, Fred," Quinn forced out. She looked down at the boy she thought was his son. "Hi," Denny, masquerading as Jake, mumbled. The real Jake waved at him from behind Quinn. Denny waved back. They both wore matching wizard capes and gave each other the thumbs up. Switching back was going to be a piece of cake, Denny thought. He couldn't wait to be back with his mom and his annoying sister Sammy. "Are you excited about the ride, Jake?" Quinn asked. "Don't speak to him," Fred told Quinn. Quinn rolled her eyes. They moved forward in the long, twisting line slowly. Quinn was determined not to speak to Fred, but she also couldn't help but notice how alike Denny and Jake looked. It was hard not to stare at both of them, especially in those capes. When they reached the front of the line, Sammy motioned the boys forward towards the front of the coaster, a 3-seater row. The head of the coaster was the head of the dragon with fiery red eyes and a gaping mouth, ready to shoot fire across the land of Dragon World. "We should all sit together," Sammy pointed towards the front. "Oh, I thought you were scared," Jake taunted. Sammy shoved him and Jake almost shoved back before Denny intervened. "Hey, don't be mean to my sister," Denny elbowed Jake. "She's my sister too," Jake retorted. "Shut up, you're both being dumb," Sammy snapped. The boys both looked at her. "If we sit together, then they have to sit together." Sammy motioned to Quinn and Fred, who were standing with their arms crossed and not speaking to one another in line. "You're the smartest kid sister ever," Denny fist bumped Sammy. "Hey, I'm your only kid sister," Sammy retorted. "Yeah, but the best." Jake fist bumped Sammy too. Just then, a ride conductor in a wizard outfit motioned the three children forward with a wand. "Step right up, kids, for the most magical ride of your life." Sammy, Jake, and Denny scurried forward and onto the front seats of the ride. They pulled the safety belt down over their laps. "Sammy, are you okay up there?" Quinn called from the back. "I'm okay, Mom," Sammy yelled in reply. "Are you sure? You don't have to ride with the boys if you don't want to." "I'm okay, Mom," Sammy confirmed again. Quinn tried to step forward, but Fred shot his arm out in front of her. "Let her be, Quinn. She wants to hang with the boys." "I know my own daughter," Quinn glared. "She didn't want to go on the ride earlier." Then they heard a scream from Sammy that stopped Quinn in her tracks and her fight with Fred from escalating further. Quinn and Fred looked at each other. In an instant, Quinn tried to leave her seat to get to the children, but the crowd was too dense. Fred grabbed a hold of her shoulder. "It's fine. They're just playing about. You're not going to make it to the front." "Don't tell me what to do," Quinn retorted. She hated how childish she sounded. It may have been slightly irrational, but Quinn knew Sammy's fears all too well, since she was also scared of roller coasters, even though she didn't like to admit it. Fred fought the urge to roll his eyes at her. He knew that if Jake were in trouble, he'd be doing the same thing. But he'd seen Sammy run to the front seats with the boys. She was having the time of her life with them. It was like they were all siblings. It was strange, Fred thought, how alike Denny and Jake were. "All aboard, folks! This dragon leaves any second," the conductor said. Just then, Sammy screamed again.
Hi, Quinn here, and if you're wondering what happens next, click on the link in the description to listen to the full audio series. You can also watch the next episode here in the playlist.